Hey friends, this is Brett coming to you again with our second episode of Seeking Our Spirit. Actually, episode 2, part 1. We're going to be making a part 2 of this. It's with my good friend Michael Cover, one of my good friends, talented musician, all-around great person, and he's got a great story for you all. So enjoy. All right, so we're rolling. Salute to you, my friend.
Cheers,
Mr. Michael Cover, good
How are
to
you?
have you. I'm doing well, and I'm excited to have you here. I say always. This is only the second episode, but I get nervous before I do this.
It'll wear off.
Yeah, maybe. But I'm excited to have you. It was true what I told you, that you were on a short list of people that I thought I could sit down and have this conversation with, especially when I'm learning and doing it for the first time. So I'm honored that you would do it, and I'm glad to have you here.
Man, I'm honored to be asked.
Yeah.
I feel like you've been threatening to do a podcast for a long time.
I have been, yes. Not to get into that whole thing, but apparently that's a trait of a 9 on the Enneagram. So, yeah. So basically, you know what we're trying to get at here, but just to say it again, I'm fascinated by hearing. We use this word spirit or spirituality all the time. And if you really dig into that and what people mean when they say that, it can be very different. They're very different things. Mm-hmm. And so I love the idea of sitting with people and hearing about their story and what that word means to them, sort of through their story. So,
yeah.
And as you know, as a way into the conversation, I guess I'm sort of just asking folks to give us their spiritual outline, timeline, I guess, and then maybe what would you say is your quote unquote most spiritual experience in your life?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm excited to talk about all of that. And it's interesting too, just like thinking about how to break that down, or like where those things kind of got rolling, or the way that I think about spirituality versus this is sort of like a maybe an outside kind of macro view of it, but I think it is interesting now where people are a lot more willing to talk about being spiritual or spirituality and than they would be, say, religion.
Right.
That's like a word that people, I don't think they like to use as much.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, that brings me to the point of this. It's like, well, what are we meaning when we say that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that word has gotten very broad.
Well, I think that when you say the word spirituality, it tends toward the personal in a way that religion tends toward maybe the like establishment of a religion or a church or whatever. And some things happen, particularly in, say, I don't know, the Catholic Church, that maybe people, don't want to associate with that being a spiritual, I don't know, there's a distance maybe that's been created. Now, we talk about this all the time, and people's reluctance to be maybe involved in a church, but speaking as somebody, and this will, it's kind of a segue into why I identify as not only a Christian, but as an Episcopalian, is people. I think that's the difference between that definition of spirituality that is more idiosyncratic or more personal. I don't think it's valuable, but I think the function of a church is the people, and the important thing about religion, maybe not the big ideas, which I love talking about too, and we'll do that, but just at the end of the day, where do you look for God? Are you looking for God in a book? Are you looking for God in
sure.
In the last place I thought to look, throughout my whole life, the last place I thought to look for God was in other people. What is it? Sartre, right? The French philosopher, playwright. Hell is other people. His most famous quote.
Can be, yeah.
It can be, yes. And also the exact inverse of that can be true also. I mean, when you open yourself up to other people, it's a risk. It's not always a calculated one. But anyway, I ruined my perfect segue.
No, that's great. I mean, it's something that I talk about often and will say ad nauseum that, it's there are different languages in this thing we call spirituality and or how people hear or experience God, and people is one of them. I think for some folks that I see. Yeah.
And there's a broad spectrum. I liked your conversation with Howard was fantastic, by the way. It's beautiful, and I really liked something that you said about. I already mentioned this to you, but just the idea that we do have these really individual, personal ways that we experience God, whether it's literally a voice that you are hearing, or if it's more like a feeling, or whether it's
right, experiences.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Gut
and
feel.
How much of that is something that you feel is coming directly from some mystical outside force, or something that is inside of you, or something that that's related to your
and do you chalk it up to coincidence, or do you, all that stuff
you can do both, by the way,
right?
And a lot of those spiritual experiences I've had, there have been reevaluations of them, to where I say, okay, like I read that this way at this time because of where I was in my life, the way that I looked at things, and maybe I can see them now as, you wanted it to be God. Maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't.
Yeah. And yet, in that moment, it was.
Yes.
Right.
And maybe that's the most important because it's the most immediate, or it's the most, it's the rawest, or you're trying to tell yourself something. Does it really matter if it was from you or if it was from God? I mean, are those the same thing?
Right. Yeah. Where do we split those hairs? How is it different? Yeah. Well, so what would you, and apologies to anybody who's maybe ever going to listen to this, and Coco is eating right now, and I'm sure that's getting picked up, but blasted Coco. So how would you sort of enter into, like, if you think about a timeline of spirituality in your life, like where do you even enter into that? Is that a childhood thing?
I think so. I think so, because my family came into the Episcopal Church they weren't Episcopals, neither of my parents, until after I was born, joined the church, started bringing us to Ascension.
Yeah.
And I was baptized old enough to remember being baptized. Okay.
So
early memory, really early. So I don't know how old I was, but it was, it's one of those memories where it's so old and it's been digested in so many different ways that I don't even know what relationship it bears to like reality.
Yeah.
Because like I've been to Ascension as an adult and been like, this doesn't look like the place that I remember in that, But I think just like anybody that age, you are, it makes an impression on you, I think. All the iconography and the building and the solemnity of the...
and that space is impressive.
It is.
That's interesting. So, I mean, because it's not necessarily so for all people. I mean, so you would say that when you think about spirituality in your life, it actually did start for you, at least this awareness of this thing.
That's something big
in a relationship with the church.
Yeah, but I think it has a lot to do with like me being fascinated by like the big stuff, the big questions, which even when I wasn't aware that's what I was fascinated by, that's what it was. Like some kind of thing that's bigger than you, that's outside yourself, that you don't understand. Or the world, maybe as you get older and you realize like, hey, some of this stuff doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah. Were you asking those questions as a child before baptism?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So like you're in this sort of your church, as far as your recollection, your church kind of experience as your family was invited in. You must have been like what, like 7, 8?
I think younger. I think like maybe 4 or 5.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I try to relate that to like, you remember how tall you were, like where your idea was, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm looking up at everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to be pretty small. Not that I'm big now.
Yeah.
But so, we didn't really stay. I don't know how long we like regularly attended at Ascension, but when kind of that, when church came back in my life again was in middle school, and we started going to St. John's. And again, I think that was related to, I can't remember who was going there, that we kind of got brought in. But they asked me if I was interested. I was at that age where confirmation was a thing. Yeah. And, they kind of asked me if I would be into that. And I was like, I like this. And I liked. I mean, St. John's again. This is a space that's just gorgeous and it's impactful. Like the services felt big. They felt important. You know, I got really into that part of it. Kind of the. I don't want to call them trappings because they're not. They're for a specific purpose. Like you're supposed to be made to feel this way in this space.
Experiential worship. That's an interesting thing. Maybe connecting down the line, if at all, with musical performance. Right?
Oh yeah, they're all related, dude. All in one. Yeah.
So to pause you there. So do you have any recollection of anything you would call spirituality in between those church touch points?
I mean, not
really. The answer can be no. I just am checking.
I don't think that I thought about it so much. Yeah. I mean, all these things are parallel, though, because while I was... I guess the age... Well, I'm skipping over something really big, actually. So what I wanted to go back and spend some time on this, but... a very formative, I don't know if you would call it formative spiritually. I think it is once I kind of tie some of this stuff together, but... Yeah. The summer after 5th grade, I went to Norway as part of this like exchange kind of program. This is not really an exchange program. It was they called it Children's International Summer Villages, and it was a program where kids from a whole bunch of different countries around the world all went to this one, basically like summer camp. Yeah. And hung out. Wow. And it was a whole month.
Yeah, it's intense.
So it would have been, I guess it would have been 12, 11.
About 12. There, yeah.
And... you know, flying all the way overseas with just this. There were 4 kids in the delegation. We had a delegation like leader, and that experience was. You could say all of the pretty things about it. I mean, it was amazing to experience another country and to feel like you were in just a completely different space than you've ever been in. But
yeah,
but it was also like. Trying to sum it up. After we were there for 2 weeks, you were supposed to go. It was basically a time for the counselors to get to hang out, and the kids went, and it was like a furlough. Like you and another one of the kids from a different country went and stayed with a family while the counselors got to hang out and do whatever. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure I knew what they were doing. Yeah. Now looking back, they were probably having a pretty good time. Yeah. But we had people from everywhere. There was a delegation from Thailand. One of my best friends was a kid named Sun from Thailand, and from South America, from the Middle East, from obviously from Europe. I mean, there were kids from Eastern Europe. There were kids there from everywhere. But the kid that I went with was one of the only kids that didn't speak English, and as a very privileged, narcissistic American kid, that was like the end of the world to me. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this guy, you know? And instead of trying to figure out ways to still like hang out or communicate, he liked to play basketball, and so did I, but I wasn't going to play basketball with him because I couldn't understand what he was saying. Okay. It's very embarrassing of me to say as an adult. I felt bad about it. Huh. But it was, I mean, honestly, it was one of the first times I really kind of experienced like a crisis of like loneliness. Like I felt isolation in a way I don't think I ever had as a human being, in a way that I didn't feel connected to anybody. You know, I was keeping a journal. It stops there. It stops there.
You're keeping a journal up to that point, like up to that trip.
No, up to of the trip
as a part of the trip. Oh, got it.
Yeah, so I was writing every day. It stops at that point. I still have that journal. But
that's interesting.
I remember his name is Paolo, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you anything about him. Yeah. But that's a whole nother. I wrote a paper about this in college about this trip, and it was kind of my first exposure to the idea of what America actually is or meant, like what my place in that was. Because, dude, like this was 90, 91, 92, something like that. And we were like rock stars. Like Americans were like, the rest of the world used to have a considerably higher level of respect than maybe we get now. But there was a lot of like privilege in that, and it felt strange. It felt like a kind of a pressure maybe in a way too, and just and not really deserved. It had a lot to do with money. I mean, there was one delegation there from the Faroe Islands, and those kids were really very isolated because that's a very poor country and they didn't speak English. Yeah. For those reasons, they just kind of kept to themselves, and nobody really knew anything about them.
So isolation.
Yeah.
In that moment being. I mean, that's what I hear, sort of the crux of that story.
Dude, I literally remember I had like a long, dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
As like a, 12-year-old. And what was the song that was playing? It was the first time I ever heard Hey Jude. That was laying on the floor in the dark. And somebody was playing it on a record player in another room. And I remember laying there and just feeling like that was like this beacon of light in what otherwise was almost pitch black. I mean, I felt...
Yeah.
You're very melodramatic at that.
So much happening. Yeah, I mean, hormones changing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like just this time where even if you were here, some of that's going on. But like to then go through, what I see adults go through in mission work if they've never gone anywhere. I hear some of that there. Like you do feel alone, especially if you go without a team. There's a loneliness.
When everything feels kind of alien too,
Right.
Like
there's all that. It's the culture shock thing, partly. But then I hear a different level there with you. I mean, and then there's like, you're not with your parents. You're not with your family. You're not with anybody you know. Man, I don't know. There's a lot there. Somewhat of a... Well, how did you come out of that?
I mean, not great, really. There was... And again, you've dialed into it. There was a lot of other stuff happening, too. When I got back, I found out that we were moving. And so I had already had a pretty good idea of like, I'm going to go to
super helpful
Bearden Middle School, and I know who all my friends are, and they're going to be there. And all of a sudden I find out like, no, we're not actually, we're going somewhere else. Now, having lived in Knoxville for 41 years, I'm like, we moved like a mile away.
Oh, it was intense.
But that was a lot back then. It was like a whole new thing that was going to happen. And I don't know. I think I found out some like uncomfortably sort of ugly things about myself, like some of the ways that I treated people when I was there, when I was in that place of just feeling like homesick and lonely and just not great. And I did some things I'm not proud of. Like I tore up one of the kids that was in our delegation. I tore up his camera. Like he had like a disposable camera he'd been using, and I guess I thought that it was a joke, or I just wanted to do something cruel. I don't know.
In front of him, or like in secret?
Like mean.
Oh, wow.
It was mean, dude.
Yeah.
And it's not how I thought of myself, not how I think of myself now, but I don't know. I guess you get pushed to certain places as a kid. Kids can be extremely cruel. But at the end of the day, it was just me like kind of lashing out, just being like, I'm not happy right now.
Right.
Like nothing right now feels good to me. Also, this Hungarian dude stole my girlfriend Elena. That was brutal.
Hungarians. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Peter. Hate that dude. He was all tall and Hungarian.
Yeah.
Good looking.
Oh, man. So I'm trying to... I'm just trying to sit with that for a second. I mean, what you do... Because I can't... Is it... I part of me is just going, okay, I mean, it's just like the time. There's so many levels and things happening there. Part of me, I guess part of why I was asking the question of, how did you come out of that is, as you were talking about it, some of the feelings I was getting was, that necessary thing in this very often repeated theme in anything spiritual is like you go into the darkness to get to the light, right?
No, I didn't see. That wasn't something that was immediately evident. If there was, I remember getting back to the airport and literally jumping over a row of chairs to get to my family.
Yeah,
I remember that very vividly. It's a long time to be away from your family when you're a kid.
Were your parents divorced at this time?
No. That's a whole. We won't get there for a minute, man. That didn't happen until I was an adult. But I think there was a lot of that feeling of isolation or alienation. It kind of didn't go away. It kind of stuck around, and a lot of that was because it was displaced, as in huge scare quotes, right? Like I'm moving a couple miles down Kingston Pike. This is Knoxville. I'm not going far, but in middle school, I had to try to make a whole new life, kind of, meet new, make new friends, meet new people. Not something I'm very good at, or didn't think I was anyway. But yeah, it's some of that stuff that you wish you could go back and just kind of shake yourself, like when you were a kid, and be like, dude, you had everything in the world going for you. And I mean, I had a hard time in middle school. I had a really hard time, and ended up, there were some, I had to start seeing therapists and psychiatrists, and there were some hospitalizations and just, over emotional and behavioral problems. And a lot of it was just me going like, I don't like where I'm at. Like, I don't like how this feels.
Yeah. So that isolation moment on that trip was super pivotal then. I mean, that sounds like what you're saying is sort of something that's run through a large chunk of your life. You point back to that moment.
I think this is the first time I felt it. I don't think that caused the rest of it, but I think that was the first time that I felt, and it's something that I got kind of familiar with. Was just not feeling plugged in.
Yeah.
Not feeling like I was a part of what everybody else was. It's probably not a very rare thing to feel at that age, but at that time it felt like I was the only one in the world, who'd ever like felt this way. So yeah, and then that in context of being somebody that has always been sort of like searching, seeking, questing, whatever, for like larger truth or larger, like the keys to the universe, man. Like I just wanted to know what all this was about.
I mean, I sort of just off the side mentioned the Enneagram earlier, but like, again, here, this reminds me of that system. And I see this in people a lot where there's sort of what do I want to say, a thread that runs through one's life. I don't know, crucible's not the right word, I don't think, but like, or I don't know, you mentioned like, it's almost like a certain song written on your heart, right? A certain emotion or feeling or thing that I don't know how we explain how it's there, why it's there, but it's there. Yeah, and it's like becomes this thing that for the rest of one's life, when you really break down whatever you're going through in your life, it usually is related back to that thing. And it's weird. I don't know that and we don't need to get into that here, and I don't know if you've done any work on that, but like, so each number in the Enneagram will talk about, they put it in terms of like a childhood wound. And it's getting to that stuff. And a lot of it is like child felt neglected, or their voice didn't matter, and so it'd be interesting to look at what number you end up identifying with and seeing if like isolation, if you see any of that language there.
Well, I mean, it plays into, I think, I mean, there's other stuff that I just, I don't really want to go into, but I think that, coming from a place of like when I was a kid, when I was in elementary school, I was just good at school. Like I just was like, I didn't have to try very hard. And it was like, you get,
That's
sort
nice.
of like this golden child status. I didn't like it. I kind of bucked against that too. And that comes up again.
And you are the oldest?
Yeah. And my little sister, I think she got, I think school was harder for her because she got compared to me. And it's not that I was, God, I don't even know. I don't love the way they classify you at that age and go, these are like the gifted smart kids. And these are, it's kind of lazy to me because they didn't have to do any work with me to teach me. I just was good at school. I would pay attention and do the stuff I was supposed to do, and could read at a pretty high level early on, and it didn't do me any favors, man. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. I've got this brain that I wish it would do less a lot of times. I don't want it to be running constantly. That's what it does. But I think that I got rewarded a lot for stuff that wasn't very hard, and things were good. Things were easy. So these are the first times I'm describing to you really that like things were hard, that things were challenging, that I was like, I'm not in a place where I feel comfortable. And there's a lot of privilege to that too, right? I mean,
that's interesting there to relate those two things, because it's like, well, in some ways, even though the kind of pinnacle moment of feeling isolation was in this event, in this trip that you're talking about, given all the things you just said, you were already experiencing isolation in some way
I don't think I knew it though
already. Oh,
'Cause
no,
it didn't feel
this
like
is
it.
all in hindsight. I mean, this is all just looking back, but it's interesting to make those connections. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I don't
like,
think I put that together.
because you were in being, again, the blessing can also be the curse. In being this accelerated kid, you were experiencing some form of isolation.
Yeah, I don't know. I hate looking back at all of that and thinking that I would hear about my potential a lot. And that was something that I used to...
It becomes a burden.
A burden maybe, but also it'd just be like, it's kind of what turned me the other way, where I was like, I actually don't think you guys know what you're talking about. And that was the whole teen angst and rebellion phase. I mean, I don't think anybody's had it as strongly as me. Like that, just fully embraced all of that. I was like, I don't think none of this stuff makes any sense. The way the world's put together doesn't make any sense. I don't want to participate in it,
So you started to buck those.
Yeah, really in middle school. Yeah, and then it just never stopped.
Yeah. Again, though, I mean, again, don't let me put words in your mouth. Maybe this doesn't click at all with you, but what I'm seeing from the outside is, well, of course you bucked that. If that almost subconsciously is the thing that is feeding a feeling of isolation, then of course, screw that, man. Like,
it did make me feel.
I want nothing to do with this.
It did make me feel different. It did make me feel, and I don't think I realized, and I think this is true for most kids, that once you get to that middle school age and puberty happens and all the social hierarchy stuff starts to come into play, all that stuff happens, that you realize for the first time, become conscious of how other people are perceiving you.
Yeah.
And I think that was the part where I wanted to be, look, I don't want to be different. I don't want to be special or whatever. I want to be one of the people that's hanging out. Like, I was more worried about getting a girlfriend. Things like that. Which, with going back to church again, of course there was a pretty girl, because then there always, right? But I think that was the experience of, actually that's a pretty cool segue. Give me some marks for that. That brings me back to the confirmation class, because that was a really cool group of people. And that was a really cool group of kids. And there's something that happens in youth groups at churches, at least the ones I've been part of, where they are, a lot of times they're kids that maybe wouldn't have been in the same group, wouldn't have been grouped together because of where they live or what schools they go to, whatever that are.
Yeah. And
it's a small enough group that there's not really able to be that stratification.
Yeah.
Right. So everybody kind of does actually know everybody.
I'm smiling because it makes me think of the Breakfast Club.
Oh, yeah.
It's what happens in there.
That's right. Because all these walls you put up between people ends up, those don't matter.
But when they go back to school...
It's not the same.
But it's weird, yeah. But I hear you, yeah, totally.
And it also, that puts a cap on the Norway story, too, because really the main thing that I came away with, if I'm going to take a positive away from it, I found out all kids are the same. It doesn't matter where they come from. They're all interested in the same things. They have a similar kind of sense of humor. They want to just get along. Like, the cultural differences were things that we highlighted, but it was more for like an educational perspective. It was just kids wanting to have a good time and hang out. And it wasn't hard to do, and I think that's how kids are wired to be.
Human beings. Everyone wants to feel part of the group, part of the thing, part of something, and not feel isolated. To go back to that theme, what strikes me as interesting too, and what you're saying is, I think that's something. Well, and this is we don't need to diverge onto this topic, but I just think it's interesting to put sort of a pin in of, is that a common experience in youth groups in general?
I don't know.
Is it sort of an Episcopalian, thing? Folks will make jokes. I know, that sometimes like the Episcopal youth group is the land of misfit children, right?
Yeah.
And to some extent, that's why that feeling that you're describing exists, because it's just this feeling of eclectic folk, different folk that maybe, as you said, wouldn't normally hang out together, and yet in this beautiful environment. And I could go on and on about even just like the Episcopal Church culture as being a model of that.
I think it's a really good model of it, and that's coming from the experience I had. I mean, we got pretty tight, like that group of kids did.
And I'll shut up after this, but and from like this question of what is spirituality from that angle, I think it's something that often, especially people outside of the church, completely miss about what the power of the church is, right? Because it's really that. And that is super spiritual just in and of itself, right?
Yes.
This place that, like, it is sort of, God, now I'm preaching, but it's like, it is sort of like a living, breathing example of the kingdom of heaven.
That's beautiful, man. And I mean, that's honestly why I'm talking about it. That's what I'm getting at. I feel like that's the point. And there's a lot of other ways you experience it, but when I look back at my life and you know, your central question, what's spirituality? Like, the thing that I always come back to now, I'm going to tell you about these other just, this gorgeous, you know, experience I had watching a sunrise. That shit, that's real too.
Yeah.
That's also there. But the things that really resonate to me, you know, as like a 41-year-old man, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's going like, these connections I made with people, these times that I was able to feel part of something and part of a group and a collective that like is working together, that's it. That's what it is.
Yeah. Gosh, and that's so, I don't know if you did all this intentionally, but that as a book, as a other end of the spectrum from the isolation stuff, is just feels like this total beautiful arc.
That
journey.
Push and pull back and forth of me feeling either isolated or part of something is really, it's central to me, and it might, I think, and I can't speak for every human on the planet, but I think that's all our story. A lot of times that's what it is. It's where do you feel safe? Where do you feel part of something versus where do you feel separation? Because I mean, you know, one of the definitions of hell we talk about, right, is separation from God. And if there's God in everyone and in everything, then separation from other people is hell, right? So is hell other people, or is hell? Where are we at with that, right?
Yeah.
So that does take me to. I know you want some of this stuff too, and like I like talking about it. But
Wherever you want to go, man.
The confirmation class culminated in we stayed at the lodge on top of Mount LeConte, and we did the sunset service, and we did a sunrise service, and it just blew the top of my head off, dude. It was like fireworks, you know.
Yeah.
Just felt like I was seeing. Something so miraculous it transcended words, and having that contextualized in the liturgy, and in Father John Ross went up there with us and did both the services, and just a wonderful priest, wonderful man, and being part of that with the group that I'd come up with, and it felt very. I'd never seen anything like that. I'm still chasing that dragon. I'm still like a sunrise junkie, and I've never seen a better one.
That's cool. It's well, and it's great. It's a great example of. I mean, often people when they speak of spirituality will talk about nature, but to your point, like it's like when you try to take a picture of a beautiful sunset. There's no way you're ever going to be able to convey.
No, man. I remember the way that the light changed and watching it. Through the valley, just creep into all of the corners, and the way the colors changed in the sky, and where I was standing, like all of it.
Well, and what hits me, given just the arc of this whole conversation, is it there again, like you're doing communion, right? This service, this ritual, this ancient thing, communion in union and unity with these people, in union and in unity with creation and nature, and you know, the liturgy saying in union and unity with God, right? So that all
it's
sort of
pulling it all together
in that moment,
absolutely,
where one definitely doesn't feel isolated.
No, man. I mean, I felt part of literally everything.
Yeah.
I felt like I was, you know, the vibrating, you know, center of what the truth of all this is.
Right.
That may be that, you know, I spend the next 30 years chasing just that feeling of being that a part of the whole thing, not just the human project of us all trying to figure out how we do this, but the whole, whatever the bigger picture we can't see is, you know, just being like a piece of this universe. It's like that thing we say where, you know, we're made of the same stuff as stars, and we walk around, you know, not thinking about that at all. It doesn't occur to us most of the time, where every single thing that happens every second of every day is miraculous, and we lose it. You get that feeling. Maybe it's easier when you're a kid and things move slower and you haven't seen everything yet. The older you get, you get more jaded. The magic goes away. It shouldn't, but it does. And there are ways to get it back, obviously, or maybe you just have to make peace with the fact that you're not going to experience it in that direct a way again. It's more an intellectual enterprise at some point.
Yeah, I had a priest dear friend and mentor, tell me once that, I've probably said this to you before, but tell me once that what he recommended you do with moments like that, because of what you're talking about, is you treat them as touchstones. And he actually would like get objects and almost symbolically project those moments onto that object, and he would carry them in his pocket. And so in the times where he couldn't find that experience or that moment, then he would touch that in his pocket.
Oh, for sure. The tactile nature, right? That's a method of prayer. Yeah.
And it would, but sort of to that struggle of like, these things are few and far between,
and they're ephemeral. They don't last. My memory of it does, but the feeling of it, I'm never gonna feel that exact thing again.
So so that's stepping back. Like, yes, awesome, great, big, beautiful sort of message and story here. And then so where do you go from there? Like, what's next? I mean, I obviously know enough about your life to know there are tragedies and struggles and difficulties. Some folks are going to name those and say those are part of the spirituality. Some folks, they're just not. They're just the crappy stuff that happened in life. So I'm sort of curious to see where you go next.
Yeah, man. I mean, the way that I think it goes for most people's, middle school's tough. High school was too. I definitely had a colored experience with it. It's all the same stuff of like them wanting to put me in, honors and AP classes, and me gradually figuring out that like I don't want to do any of this stuff, and then I actually think that it's a waste of time.
But I was also... Were you developing your musical identity at that point?
So that stuff's what I'm using probably in the same way that if I was looking for God in high school, it was through music and through movies and through books. That sounds weird, but I was, like I got really into my first favorite movie director was Stanley Kubrick. I was obsessed with 2001. I thought there were these big ideas buried in that. That I could get to the bottom of, right?
It makes total sense to me, though, because just as in describing a moment in nature, this incredible moment that you can't put into words, well, music especially, but also movies and books and other forms of art in general, but music especially, right? What's the classic sort of quote that it says or expresses things that words cannot?
The ineffable,
right? And so it sort of makes total sense of your chasing that dragon.
Yeah, and it was, it's very cliche. I mean, none of the things that I was discovering were obscure, right? I mean, I fell in love with the Beatles. That's what got me into music. Specifically, my dad's old copy of Abbey Road, and I can't even tell you how many times I played that record. The song on that record that made me feel the closest to that sunrise was "Here Comes the Sun." It evoked that for me. It was about that. Like everything's going to be okay feeling. I don't think there's a better song about that. Maybe I can see clearly now it gets there too. But I started playing guitar. I started trying to... I learned how to play guitar so I could write songs. That's what I wanted to do. I got really into science fiction too, also stuff that was trying to answer big questions or ask big questions and looking for answers in it, and not finding them. Frank Herbert especially. All the Dune books, I've read those more than I've read anything, all 6 of them. Which you should read. If you haven't read them, you should read. You should read God Emperor of Dune. You should read that book. That's one of my favorite books.
And reading.
But dude, you can get an audio tape of anything at this point. You got no excuses. But what's funny about music? I hadn't thought about it this way before.
When it hits, you feel no pain.
That's also one good thing. One good thing about music. For me, it was until a much later point. Much later, like 4 years later, as a kid. Felt like much later. It was a really kind of isolated experience for me. I would sit by myself in my room and work on songs and work on the guitar. And at some point, I got a 8-track and I record on that. That was very insular, individual experience. Then, not that I didn't play for people, I did, but that didn't really become a thing until like much later.
Wow. And then it becomes this vehicle.
It becomes like the thing.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. To communicate.
That's so fascinating.
But it was totally just for me. I mean, I
just
wanted to, and it was also for, some particular
girls.
Set of girls.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Always.
There's another through line.
Yeah.
There's a Wilco song called I'm Always in Love. The songs are bad too. God, it's embarrassing to go back and listen to some of that. But nobody knew that about me for a really long time. That I didn't even think I was very good. I didn't know that it was something that people would, like want to hear, or that, would be.
Yeah.
But I had a really good friend that we're just going to have to talk about, Adam, and we have to, right?
Yeah.
Who kind of pressed me senior year to enter into the talent show. And I didn't really want to do it, but I never played in front of any kind of big group of people, let alone like playing in front of your school. Like it was terrifying to me. Yeah. But I, decided to do it, and that was one of the greatest nights of my life. It's one of those things that you glory days,
Dude.
but like it was amazing.
Well, it's beautiful for me to know that I didn't know that piece of it. I didn't know that Adam pushed you into that. But it's what's blowing my mind is a couple things. You and I have talked about this many times, but like that, I don't know what it was about that moment. Of course, it makes sense that it would be like this incredible, powerful moment for you.
It was, yeah.
But it was an incredible, powerful moment for, I feel like everyone. And I can't speak for everyone, but for me.
It was electric.
It was this moment. It will forever be in my encapsulated in my mind.
That's crazy.
Why, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was just like, what is this? Whoa! I mean, it just completely. And then just to have this whole beautiful backstory that we've just gone through.
Yeah.
Like, isolation.
Never feeling part of anything. Honestly, dude.
Right. Seeing God, seeing spirituality in union. The opposite of isolation, to then doing this thing, seeking that, chasing that dragon. I'm recapping. That also somehow isolates you, and that becomes the very thing that then in this like incredible moment, like obviously we could tease all that out, and I don't want to say it would do this. It's not like it brought full union for you in any way, but it certainly catapulted. Like all of a sudden you're known in a very different way than you were.
Completely different.
Yeah.
Overnight.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was some like weird version of like I'm famous in high school.
Yeah.
To my high school.
Yeah.
Like people wanted to hear like my songs. They were like, "What songs do you write?
Yeah.
What does your stuff sound
We should
like?"
just say, in case anyone ever listens to this, that it was senior year talent show.
Yeah.
And Bearden High School, so that was class of 2000. Dave Matthews had released with Tim Reynolds the sort of acoustic Live at Luther College, I feel like it was, and that was super, super popular.
We were all extremely into that record and Dave Matthews in general.
Oh, that thing is
huge.
It's hard for me to listen to. It brings so much emotion.
It's heartbreaking. I still can't really listen to it.
I feel the same. And Michael came and played his rendition of Dave's rendition of All Along the Watchtower, and just him and an acoustic guitar. And
I remember coming onto the stage and looking out and being like, "This is too much." And I sat down and I was like, "Can you guys like make a little noise first?" And everybody started clapping, and I was like, "Okay, I think I can do this." And so
did you say that actually? I don't remember that.
And so after I mean, it was so overwhelming. Like, so many people were coming up to me. It felt like the biggest deal ever.
Yeah.
This probably sounds really silly, but it just felt so huge.
Well, I'm here corroborating it. It was massive. It was a massive moment to me, and I didn't do anything.
It felt huge. And I sent, of course, me and Adam rode there together. We did everything together at that point. Together all the time. Rode back and forth to school together. We just, we were really good friends. And I remember talking to him right after it. And he was glowing as much as me. He was as happy about it as I was. And I remember him saying, like, it's so amazing to see you do something that you're that good at and for other people to see it too. And he was like, that was the feeling that I had when I would play basketball in front of people and get that electricity, that magic. He was like, I'm so happy for you right now because I don't feel like you've ever gotten that before. Awesome. Yeah. It's making me emotional. Yeah. Sorry, but... Fine. That's how he was, though. Like he was. The word I usually use to describe Adam Downen is magic. He was magic. He'd make you feel like where you were in that place and that time and that moment was the coolest, best, most fun place you could possibly be in. Like that's what that was like for me, and I think for a lot of other people too. Because when he died, I mean. It was like it felt like a whole, town mourning someone, which I think we were, all together. And that's how we did it. We did it as a group,
we definitely did. And it was collective. It was obviously different levels. I never knew. I mean, everything you just said, I never experienced, and I just never really experienced Adam. So it was mourning on a different level, but yeah. And I feel like a broken record, but now I'm just stuck with these themes, like there again. So this person that was so instrumental in your life, I mean, again, what I'm hearing being said when he says that to you is this unified experience,
Yeah, and in a way that maybe
it just reinforces you're experiencing God or spirit in people.
Absolutely, and. But unfortunately, the other side of that coin is people go away.
Yeah.
Relationships change. Separations happen, whether they're purposeful or intentional or just completely tragic, in the way that we lost Adam. You kind of have to be on your toes to get through this thing if you're gonna, I firmly believe, and it goes to the core of the reason that I identify myself as a Christian, that we need each other to do this. That we are not islands. We are not in the best version of ourselves is when we are in tune and connected to other people, and however hard that is. And anybody who's been in a church or a family or any other group that's trying to last for a long time and continue, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard, and the highs are really high and the lows are really low. And also, how we experience them is on this weird continuum where, depending on where things end up, is this a tragedy? Is this a comedy? Is this I don't know.
Yeah.
We can't see the timeline is too long for us to see it because the timeline's not our own lifetimes, right? It's a much longer story than that. Whatever story it is that God is telling through us, or that we are telling for God, or however you see that relationship too. I mean, it's complicated and it's big and it's hard. It's hard, man. And after Adam died, I kind of didn't feel like I knew what I was doing for years after that. I don't even know, looking back, if I felt like I was even driving the bus.
Yeah.
I feel like I kind of won.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of you guys
place
to place.
Super tight with Adam. That certainly was there.
We were together, we were kind of just huddled together for survival, in a lot of ways. And, many mistakes were made. It led me to that summer after he died. He was going to go to Frontier with Young Life, and he wanted me to come with him. And after he died, they approached me and said, hey, we knew that you were going to try to go. If Adam was going, he was going. We want to offer you like a scholarship to go. And I was like, okay, you know, I don't know. I'm looking for anything. Yeah. Like what's going to work, like what's going to help in this, with this, like just grief, you know. The answer is nothing, by the way. Yeah. The answer of what helps with grief is time. It's the only thing.
Right.
But I, you know, went and got saved instead, like you do. And, you know, not to disparage the organization or that kind of more charismatic flavor of Christianity. It's not for me. I ended up feeling sort of, I think used is too harsh a term because it implies intent. I think their intentions were good. Sure. I think they were trying to help.
Right.
I think that, you know, because this was a fairly, you know, high-profile thing that I was some piece of, you know, they thought maybe I would help them save more people or something. I don't know. I came back wanting to be a Young Life leader. I did. Didn't last very long.
Yeah.
But I remember the experience of sitting on the side of this mountain and looking at the mountain and seeing the face of God, feeling like I was looking at the face of God.
Okay, up there again.
Yes, I'm in the mountains. Weird, right? It was different from the sunrise because it wasn't some fireworks display of like light, you know. It was just this place and this place that I had been kind of taken to over the period of time that you're in a retreat like that. It's kind of where they want you to go. It was when they send you out to go look for God. I found him. You know, hide and seek. He wasn't hiding.
Yeah.
He was right there.
That's sort of an interesting.
I'm a little cynical about this one for obvious reasons, but in the moment, man, it felt like I was looking at. You know,
that's
the whole, and he'd been there the whole time. That was the thing that struck me that time was like didn't go anywhere. Right.
Right. That's what's hitting me is in that point, being named in relationship with the rest of the theme we've been talking about. So actually, in a weird way, that's really, really beautiful, because if with all this backstory we've been walking through, if you then are alone now in nature and discovering, oh, actually, I've never been alone.
Right.
I mean, that's
not
actually super powerful. Yeah.
Well, again, I hate to. I really think that reevaluation of it helps me a lot, because I have been over the years a lot more cynical about that period, and I definitely went the other way. I mean, I didn't follow that path. I think I went to another retreat that same summer and got the same kind of charismatic, narcotic, getting saved kind of effect from it, and it didn't last very long. And then you go back to, you know, whatever you're doing before. It doesn't create a lasting relationship with God or lasting community of people. It can. I'm not saying that it doesn't. For a lot of people it does. It didn't for me.
Right.
Especially at that time. But again, I think I was just I was grieving and just not, again, I didn't feel like I was in charge. Just kind of stumbling around, just responding to stimuli almost.
I love though, and this isn't, I'm not in any way trying to diminish the sadness and the grief and the pain of that period in your life. But there's something that I do really love and find hopeful about. It was that moment of darkness. It's the first time you've named. All the other encounters with spirituality or God have been in people.
With other people.
Or in nature.
Maybe that's why I questioned that one.
But this one is like in that midst of darkness.
Very personal.
Is the personal,
very isolated.
Oh God, there you are.
Yeah, and I saw God in it that time.
And you've been here, you know.
Yeah.
That'll preach.
I mean, I think that's it's something that I've talked about with you countless times about God not being there is the illusion, right? But it's so hard to get to a place where you know or conscious of that or aware of that all the time.
Sure.
I mean, monks spend their entire lives trying to reach that state, right? And being in touch with the infinite. Ain't got time for that.
Yeah. That's hard.
Those glimpses of it that I've seen, though, I mean, even that one it's not that experience doesn't feel legitimate or true or honest. It's the people around it, I think I kind of soured on. That doesn't mean that they're bad. Again, doesn't mean that any of those people were bad people, and some of them I'm still friends with, but things just changed, and I needed to make some mistakes, which I, of course, went on to do.
Yeah.
But, yeah, man, I don't know. Winding road to not doing a good job in college, getting a full-time job at Blockbuster Video, which everybody's kind of nostalgic for these days, right? I kind of miss it sometimes.
Yeah.
And, and going back to school again and pursuing I went back to school to do journalism, which is funny because that's like not a thing anymore. But
so people are bringing it back.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be freelance.
Yeah.
But wanting to do journalism. Yeah, yes, that's literally where the only journalism is happening. Going back and ended up in the English department, and I mean, I love books, dude.
Yeah.
I'm a huge nerd at the end of the day, and I was looking for, in the big ideas, big books, what are the answers? Like, where are they? I'm still looking. I'm always looking right now, increasingly, I think it's just part of it is becoming comfortable with the fact that you're just not going to know. You got to kind of operate based on your best version of the answer.
Answer to what?
Well, my big question is just like, why? Like, what is all this? Like, why is this here? Why do we do it? Like, what are we doing? And does it mean anything? Like, is it for some kind of a reason? Like, all the big questions, right? Like, what is... God, what's going on with outer space, man? What's up with that? What's going on out there?
I know.
All the things, right? And is there an architect to this? Or is this just absolute chaos that's randomly ordered itself into, I don't know. I don't think that it is that.
I mean, part of the answer is in your story, I mean, maybe it's to live this experience and learn these lessons. And
well, check this out. This is something I've been thinking about, and I tried to articulate it last night at theology, and I don't think I really did a very good job, so I'm sure I'll do a worse job here. But thinking about the evolution of human beings from apes to slightly fancier apes. When our brains were evolving, our brains are getting bigger, we're becoming more intelligent. It's because we can see these patterns, right? So, like, we can observe like a tiger or a leopard or whatever that's trying to hide in the brush, and we're able to discern that this is a predator and we escape or whatever. So our brains literally evolve. Our consciousness, presumably, our consciousness are as close as we can come to a concept of the soul, right? Like, that's evolving for survival, to stay alive. So then we get to a point where we're at now. We've got these big brains that aren't designed to help us deal with the world as it exists, as we've made it, being the dominant species and enjoying a relative level of comfort and safety for the most part. In many parts of the world, that's not true, but more than it has ever been true in the past. And we've still got this,
survival mind.
Yeah, we've got this meat computer that doesn't know it's the old hardware. It's still just trying to live, and so we find all of these things. Or I think we literally a lot of us just try to make ourselves miserable.
Yeah,
right.
It's funny you say that, and again, we could go down a rabbit trail here that we don't need to go down. But actually, of all people, Theo Vaughn, who I think is quite funny.
He's funny. Yes.
And
I have a friend that used to write his tweets for him.
Oh, okay.
Because he didn't have time to write for Twitter because, he's an actual comedian.
Yeah. Well, and anyone whoever might listen to this, don't be offended by the fact that I said I listened to Theo Vaughn, because it's very inappropriate. But he said the exact same thing in a different way. And I'm not gonna go into it articulate, but his point was like, I think we're eating ourselves, like, and our mind is, because it doesn't need to even figure out how to get somewhere in the car anymore. And his point was like, that's where so much anxiety and depression is coming, because we've evolved the way you've described.
Yes.
And we're not applying that to anything. Actually, I hear other people say the very similar point physically, that a lot of our inflammation and a lot of our problems, our autoimmune disorders, are coming because we no longer have to use this body the way that we had to before. Yeah. So, but that's a whole other line of thinking. But
that's all of a piece, though, of what I've been saying about why did I feel my whole life like there's something wrong here, and I always have.
That's interesting.
I always have, and I don't think it's the way human civilizations or countries or governments or communities of people are organized. Is there something wrong with that? Yeah. Right? Like there is. And I won't go into any kind of detail about that, what I think that is. Right. But I think it's something more profound than that even. And it's maybe more in the sense of, I guess maybe in a theological sense, the idea of being fallen, right?
Yeah. Something I think broken, something that's not right in us right now.
That we fall...
and we're using that very differently than most people would understand that word.
Yes. Right? And not in the way that we are original sin.
Yeah, you did wrong, God. You are separate from God. You need
That's not the version of God I choose to believe in that would do that, right? So I think it has more to do with just the condition, again, of being in... How do you bring yourself more into the presence of God, or the constant experience of God, rather than the separation from it,
and or of true self, right?
Yes, which is again that I would see those things as being heretically more or less the same.
yeah. No, yeah, I'm with you. Awesome. So okay, I feel like you have entirely other lives after even just what we've talked about.
Yeah, that's not even into college. Yeah, there's another 20 years or so.
Is there, two questions. Is there anything else that you didn't touch on that you felt you wanted to touch on, do you want to go into, as Richard Rohr would say, second half of life?
I do want to do that. I think that might be for another day. If you want to put a cap on it, I think this is as good a wrapping place as any for this one.
Okay.
If you want to, yeah,
it's fine with me. So okay, then in the ending, you sort of did. You may have already said these. So I always want to know, like, what is the most powerful spiritual experience one has had? Are they the two you named, or do you have something else?
Man,
quote unquote spiritual.
There is stuff that is so, in recounting it and telling it to you, one of them because I've told it more than once at theology, but it's that coming out of a really hard time and having been in a really depressed state for longer than I knew that I was, being in the car and a CD in the console reflecting a little bit of rainbow onto it's so minor.
Just hit you in like
it exactly hit me right between the eyes. Yeah. It was because what really struck me about it was I have looked at that, I've seen it for months probably, because that CD had been there for forever, upside down, and I hadn't moved it. That rainbow had been there for so long, and I didn't look at it. And if I did, I didn't see it. And so when I did, it felt like, what else am I not seeing? All the time. The answer's a lot, by the way.
Yeah.
And when you're in a state like that, when you're depressed, which I feel like my experience anyway with depression has been that it feels very isolated. You feel very like you're deadened, almost like your senses are shutting down. You're not hearing things that people are saying to you. You're not seeing stuff. Like you're just literally kind of like pulled in. In some ways, totally physically you are, because you can't get out of bed or you don't want to leave the house or whatever. But in that feeling, again, it's one of those other like here comes the sun kind of moments where like, oh, there's this light that's always there. Yeah. I almost quoted the Smiths. I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
It's a great song, man.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful, man, because it's just like, it is in everything, or it's in nothing, ever, if you never want to see it or can see it.
It's in the mundane and the fantastic.
Right.
It's in all in between.
Right.
Yeah. In the most basic things, and the most like complicated ones. And
that's beautiful. That's a beautiful one. And I know you've got other ones. And
I do.
You'll probably, if we're gonna do a part 2, then maybe you want to.
I gotta save some of the juice.
Yeah, man. Well, great. This is good. I mean, anything else you wanna say, add, and we can do a part 2, man. That's great.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd love to. I think that feels like a good, solid, like, did we tie all the things together? I was trying to think of how we could.
I felt like, I mean, this is what shocks me about doing this with people always, and doing sort of direction with people, is seeing this like very clear story emerge. So I thought it was very clear. I think
the experience of living it did not feel
clear
at all.
But that's why this is great, because you step back and you're forced to look at it and see it. Yeah.
Well,
I think it's great, man.
It's a lot of you do a lot of work to get to a place where I think you can talk about these things in a way that is helpful for you, and then hopefully helpful for the people around you. And that's why we do this, dude. I mean, again, I think that like the biggest thing, and not to like jump way ahead, but jump to the end, but like the biggest thing about coming back to the church for me is 100% just been about the people and the intent behind it. And that's what my dad said this to me for years. Whenever we would talk about religion, then I would be ranting about organized religion, XYZ,
social club, whatever,
all those things. And he would always say, look, I just kind of think it's about a community, like a family that's just trying to help each other out at the end of the day. That's true. It's more than that, but that is at its core.
Well, and I used to look at that as like, okay,
that whatever,
but now it's like, oh, that's powerful.
It is. It actually really is. So
awesome, man. Well, a pleasure and honor to have you with me. It's been a pleasure and honor for me to be a part of your walk in your life, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And I love you, man.
Love you too, brother.
And anything you want to plug? You don't have a music kind of band project right now? Anything you want to put out there?
Oh man, no, I don't think so. If Third Creek ever gets,
find Michael Cover and expect good music from him for eternity.
You could look up. You know what? If you were going to do anything, you could go back and find. We had a really awesome band there for a hot minute called Third Creek Revival, and you can still find us on YouTube.
Awesome.
There's a lot of stuff out
there. It was great.
It was. It still will be.
I'm still waiting for you guys to keep going. Yeah, man.
It's got to get in that studio.
Good deal. Well, I'll look forward to that. All right, and we'll do part 2 coming up. And if anyone ever listening to this wants to be a part of the show and tell their story, talk about what Spirit is with me, you can email the show at seekingourspirit@gmail.com. All right. Peace. Thanks, brother.